Welcome to the Takeout. Welcome to Cornelius, North Carolina. We are on Lake Norman, and I did a little bit of research because that's all I ever do, a little bit of research. It is the largest man-made lake in the state of North Carolina. We're here with Thom Tillis, Senator from North Carolina. Tom, great to see you.
520 miles of shoreline, to be precise, and it's beautiful from top to bottom. You can go 40 miles up there and go north of I-40 and see the next dam if you know what you're doing in shallow water, and I do.
You do know what you're doing. Dammed in 1963, so this lake, Lake Norman, just a little bit younger than you and I.
Yep. Took 3 years to fill up.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
You hang out here?
I love it out here. You know, I'm either on this lake or Mountain Island Lake, which is just below us. It's just beautiful. I mean, you can see nesting bald eagles. You can see all kinds of wildlife diversity here. Right over there, there's an island I call Egret Island where the gray herons nest, and it's almost like Jurassic Park when they're out there clucking and the hatchlings are getting about ready to fly. It's just so much to do out here.
We are on the deck of Hello Sailor, a very well-known, well-traveled restaurant here. Lunch is en route. We'll get that in due time. Let's start with where the news is currently. Ukraine. There was a summit in Alaska. I'm sure you saw, read about it. There was a meeting at the White House yesterday described by one participant as Team USA, Team Europe. Your assessment of where things are and where they need to go.
Where they need to go is there's no scenario where Putin even tying makes sense. He invaded Ukraine. He overestimated his capabilities and grossly underestimated Ukrainian people's capability to repel what he thought was going to be a 2-week takeover of an entire country. But Putin is a murderer. He is still watching innocent civilians being murdered almost on a daily basis. I was in Kyiv about 5-6 months ago, and I went to Bucha, which would be kind of like Cornelia in relation to downtown Kyiv. Bucha would be a suburb of Kyiv, where Vladimir Putin, over 30 days, allowed the systematic kidnap, rape, assassination, and torture of over 500 people in a town just like Cornelius. And anybody that thinks that behavior should be rewarded by giving him land or giving him a graceful out, I think it's misguided.
What happened there is one of the reasons he is an indicted war criminal.
That's exactly right. Bucha was only one of hundreds of examples of where Putin has allowed his KGB training to basically metastasize through the Russian military, where they invade a home, they rape the wife in front of a husband, and then assassinate the husband and maybe rape a child, a daughter, in front of the mother, and then leave. They are systematically trying to terrorize these communities, and it is wrong, and it is a threat to democracy, and Putin needs to be held accountable for it.
So when the president pushes for peace and talks about land swaps, how do you internalize that?
I think I can only accept that if the Ukrainian people are behind an agreement that the current president, Vladimir Zelensky, agrees to. If he doesn't, then we've got to defer to them. Let's say that the tables were turned. Let's say a fictitious country to our south or our north invaded Texas or some northern states. How would we like it if Germany said, you guys are just going to have to accept, in spite of the fact that tens of thousands of people have been murdered, that you have internationally recognized borders that were invaded by this fictitious country, that your children have been systematically raped, the parents have been assassinated, you need to give up land. How do you think that the American people would turn to another fictitious country in Europe that says, y'all need to settle for that? Look, this is a fight between, it's a reemergence of the Cold War. Vladimir Putin has no interest in democratizing. The provocation of Ukraine was not that they thought that Ukraine was going to attack Russia. Putin's provocation is the fear that a former Soviet satellite could become a thriving Western democracy. That is his fear. He is afraid that democracy can take hold in the former Soviet satellites, and that will be the beginning of the end of his failed communist totalitarian experience. And giving him even a modicum of a win gives life to his belief that this world should be under totalitarian rule.
And tell me how you internalized what you saw in Alaska. The red carpet, the hand claps from President Trump and the rest.
Look, I would not, Alaska's a big state. I would not even want to be in the same state as Vladimir Putin. That's how much of a thug and a murderer I think he is. And he's proven it on the battlefield. This is empirically true. And so, but the president's got to deal with unseemly people. So I'm going to give the president some leeway as long as we don't all of a sudden become so arrogant as to think that we should dictate the terms of peace for a sovereign nation. Quite honestly, I am pleased to see what some of the European leaders are doing. I mean, the European leaders need to be willing to go it alone and support Ukraine, even if the United States taps the brakes a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's that important to European democracy. Folks, we don't want American blood to be shed again in the hundreds of thousands like the last time we had to free Europe. And we're setting up for that same threat if we don't deal with Putin and totalitarianism that's invaded sovereign land. What's next? Moldova, the Balkans, all the former Soviet satellites. That's what Putin wants. And if he just gets a push here, then he sits back and tries to find the next opportunity.
Before the summit, the president said he was expecting and would come close to demanding a ceasefire. After the summit, that went away. The threat of sanctions still hangs out there, but it seems an abstraction. And Putin continues to buy time from the president. On those two scores, ceasefire and sanctions, where are you?
I think a ceasefire, that we should move on sanctions until there is a ceasefire, period. I think that what Lindsey Graham's put together, we should pass out of the Senate. I think the president shouldn't have a problem with that. I think he can hold it in the House.
Why is the Senate waiting for permission from the president?
I don't know why. I wouldn't. I mean, if I were the majority leader, I'd put it on the floor. It's got 87 bipartisan co-sponsors. Put it out there.
Bailey is here with Hush Puppies and Pickles, getting us started. Bailey, thank you so much.
They are really good. Thank you. I don't know what would be wrong with us sending a very clear message to Russia that we're serious, that we have 80-plus members prepared to vote on this bill. Hold it in the House if you choose to, and then let Speaker Johnson know if you want that lever later on. But why we would even prevent its consideration just doesn't make sense to me. I don't think you're strengthening your hand. The other thing that you do...
You might be demonstrating weakness.
I think you do. Yeah, or maybe equivocation. Hesitation. I think it also sends a message to countries that would be affected by the sanctions that we're serious about it. So get to work now in case that we do pass it out of the House. So I'll be going back to D.C. and really encouraging, which I already have, to the majority leader that I think we should move it out of the Senate. I think Lindsey Graham agrees with that, and then just hold it in abeyance in the House, have a little bit more weight.
What's your gut tell you? Does that happen in September? Sanctions?
I hope so, but I don't know. I think it would probably depend on whether or not Putin comes in. Okay, he gets a red carpet reception in Alaska, and let's start doing the body count since that happened to today and between now and Labor Day when we return. I think there are going to be more and more innocent civilians, Ukrainian military in body bags while we're negotiating a peace. That just tells me
missiles and drones were at play in
when
the
they
hours,
were meeting.
in the hours before the summit,
Yeah.
and all day Monday while the meetings were going on at the White House. What does that tell you?
It tells me that Vladimir Putin is the murderer, rapist by proxy, and kidnapper that he always has been. He is a broken man. He has a destroyed worldview. He is killing Russians. He's got over 1 million either dead or wounded, not able to return to the battlefield casualties of Russians, right? And he's continuing to throw them into a meat grinder, and he's continuing to go after innocent civilians. Why does any reasonable person think that he's capable of a lasting peace?
When I covered the Obama administration, it was said to me by someone who worked for the president at the time, here is a harsh reality that the West needs to comprehend. The West, Europe and the United States, will never care about Ukraine as much as Putin does.
Well, I think that may be true of the far West, but I think Europe cares a lot about them. They see A Putin win in Ukraine is an existential threat, and they should. So I think that it depends on where you are on the Western horizon, but I believe every Democrat nation in Europe knows that this is an existential crisis, which is why I believe that if for whatever reason the United States taps the brakes on support, I hope they put their foot on the accelerator and defeat this man. And it's about defeating Putin. It's not about the Russian people. The Russian people are eating grass and living in horrible settings right now. The economy has been destroyed. Anybody that wants to try and gloss over the reality that average, everyday Russians are suffering, the best thing that happened is to get Putin out of Russia.
Does it bother you when President Trump refers to Russia as a great power?
Yeah, I don't think they're a great power. How can a great power? I mean, let's just be, I'm an empirical kind of guy, right? A great power. Okay, well, first they lied. They said they were going to do military exercises. That's what they used to lie and get Russian troops to the border. Then it was a special military operation. We know that they thought that they were going to go into Ukraine, have air superiority within a matter of hours, like 72 to 96 hours, and have control over whatever ground they wanted to manage over a couple of weeks. They failed. Their technical platform's not what they thought they were. Their non-commissioned officers are going to take 10 years to actually get to a good state. All of our best intelligence thought that they were a great power. How in the hell does a great power get repelled by a nation that's never gone to war by themselves and had to make up for lost time with all their armaments? They did that against a so-called great power? Well, I hope to hell that's what China is. Because maybe they're a paper tiger just like Putin proved to be.
A while ago, President Trump on social media wrote that he was wondering if Putin was tapping him along, meaning stringing this out. Mm-hmm. Is he?
How can anybody objectively look at what's happening now and conclude otherwise? I was like, yeah.
So does the president need to snap out of something?
I'm hyperbolizing, let's say, the ending comments. Okay, look, Mr. President, we'll see you in September. In the meantime, I'm going to kill hundreds more people. I'm going to kidnap and torture others. But we'll get back together after Labor Day. That's what Putin was saying. He is tapping us along. And I hope that people just stand up and recognize he's a liar, he's a thug, he's a murderer, he's a rapist, he needs to go.
Okay. Let's talk about a few other things. Close to home, do me a favor and handicap the upcoming Senate race in North Carolina that you are not going to be a participant in.
Partly cloudy. It'll be a tough race. It would have been a difficult race for me. It's always difficult when you got somebody who doesn't have any legislative experience or public service experience in an elected position. Michael Whatley, I believe, is the presumed nominee. He's somebody I've known. He's been a leader in political world, but it's very different to be a political leader and then run after an elected position. I talked with Michael. We're gonna help him, but it's going to be a lot of work, and we're going to have, I think, some headwinds because I can't change my assessment of the health care policy. Mm-hmm. I feel
its effect here in North Carolina.
And its effect in a number of purple, blue, and red states. And so, a part of my calculus for thinking maybe this was time to get the president and find another replacement is I did not want to be in a position of really can't go in every district in the state that many of my Republican colleagues are in and have to just stipulate that the health care policy that was passed in H.R. 1 is flawed. It's going to hurt North Carolina. Every other member is going to have to convey a different message. And Michael's going to have to be a part of the solution. He's going to have to get out there, recognize where the shortcomings are, and address how the legislature fixes it. Yeah, well, he's got to own it because he, like everyone else except four of us, supported the bill public, 4 Senate members. Mm-hmm. 3, I guess. They've got to own it. And the only thing that I was trying to explain, what they do need to focus on is where we would have agreed. We agree that there should be work requirements. I agree with the whole House mark, which was $800 billion of the $1 trillion in saving in Medicaid. But what the White House staff convinced the Senate chair to put into that bill is what was devastating. Not all the other good stuff. So they should rightfully claim credit for work requirement, for volunteering, all the program integrity stuff that saved $800 billion. Own that, but you also have to own the part that flipped a switch that could be about a $2 billion a year unfunded burden on North Carolina that starts in about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's refuted that estimate.
No.
I've asked them to because I would love to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to be wrong.
How does Roy Cooper factor into the race?
I think Cooper, he's
Proven vote getter.
run statewide.
Won twice.
He's got name ID. Probably 90%. I mean, I wouldn't expect 30% name ID to be honest with you for me. And so he's got strong name ID. He tries to cut a moderate image. He's moderate in his tone, but he's not moderate in his history and his policies. He's pretty liberal. Or I don't know what he is personally, but I know what policies he's supported in the past. Like all the policies that we reversed when I became Speaker of the House that had us a very unattractive state for business.
So that's the fault line. He talks centrist, but is a
liberal. I always go back to our state motto. Our state motto is esse quambidere, which means to be rather than to seem. He seems like a moderate, but his record speaks otherwise. And that's what Michael needs to run on.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts about what's happening in the District of Columbia right now? Do you think there is overreach going on or something that's overdue?
Yes. Both of those can be accurate.
Two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, okay, well, let's peel back the layers, all right? D.C. has a crime problem. The D.C. leadership has allowed the crime problem to get worse. They should be held accountable to that. But where do we stop? Do we honestly think that D.C. has the worst crime problem in the United States? No. It's got a crime problem. But where do we go from here? Do we go to Gary, Indiana, Detroit, pick some red state, go to Memphis, a red state, it's got a crime problem. Where do we go? As a limited government conservative who believes that states and local governments are the best equipped to deal with it, maybe we should be putting public pressure on them. But I don't know if we should be deploying people who want to serve in the National Guard and, if necessary, answer to the call to defend this country, to go in and deal with policy failures of the D.C. City Council.
And I imagine that would extend to the states that are sending their National Guard into the District of Columbia. That seems to me performative and something desired entirely or aimed entirely at pleasing President Trump.
100%. I was joking with a buddy of mine saying, they need to update the recruiting video to say you may get deployed to the Middle East or you may get deployed to the middle of America. I just don't think that that's why people join the Army Reserves, for example, or National Guard unit. I think that they are genuinely want to defend this country against foreign adversaries. And what we're doing now is micromanaging local governments. And I don't know how any limited government conservative can reconcile supporting that with a limited government ideology, which I've had my entire life.
Senator, you know that some people fear that this is trying to normalize the idea of federal forces in cities, and that's a danger.
You know what?
Straight up danger, they fear.
The thing I love about this country is there's a wisdom of the electorate. And I think at some point, if people thought that that's really the end game, then there will be consequences in the ballot box. We want local control. We want decentralized government. You start descending the slippery slope that you can create a strong central government, which is just antithetical to the whole premise of our nation's founding. You start rationalizing that, then you're laying the groundwork for some liberal to come in and say, well, this centralized government's going to take the country in a different direction. The best way to prevent that future threat is not to rationalize your behavior in the moment for some political expediency.
You're not running for re-election. Does that make you a victim of Trumpism?
Oh, not at all. I decided to run for re-election because I really do think that we have, unless we make some course corrections, then we are likely to experience the same sort of backlash that Obama did long before Obamacare was ever voted on. I bet the farm, literally quitting my job, in the spring of 2009 when Affordable Care Act was only being discussed because I was convinced the Democrats were going to overreach and that it was going to lay the groundwork for a historic election cycle in 2010. Nobody at the time I quit thought that Republicans were going to have a prayer. I quit my job because I was so convinced they were going to overreach. And I feel like the health care policy in H.R. 1 has overreached.
So some Democrats should quit their job and get in.
If the Democrats
is the wave's coming, is that what you're saying?
No, the beauty of it is the Democrats still look like they're poised to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory because they're eating their young. They're going after each other, which is fine with me because I'm a Republican and I like conservatives to win. But if they get their act together like Republicans did later in 2009 and 2010, then they could take advantage and have a historic cycle next year that I hope we can avoid.
The premise of my question is that if you cross President Trump, inevitably you become a casualty. There's no other outcome. True, not true?
I think it's what you make of it. I don't think I'm a casualty. I think I'm a member of 4 Senate committees where one vote makes a difference. And if I exercise that leverage judiciously, I can have a productive year and a half and help the president achieve some good outcomes that'll help him with his legacy and help Republicans get elected next year. But I don't know what a casualty is. Look, I didn't want to run for re-election the last time. So I didn't want to run the first time, okay? I ran the first time because, let's just say, the field that wanted to run in the primary did not look like they were ready for prime time. And I decided to run. There were a few people that were thinking about running. If they had run, I'd have been on their finance committee and I would have retired and been back in business. So after the first time in August 2019, I decided not to run. And if I hadn't had a discussion with a congressional member that I have a lot of respect for, former congressional member who retired, I probably would have run for re-election then. So every cycle it's been with an eye towards I'll do it if I have to, but I really don't want to. Mm-hmm. And in this particular cycle, in the moment when it was so clear that we were going to have a disagreement on the health care policy, I just thought it was the right time to make a decision that I've been going through it. And I've been very open with my donors and others that I was going through confirmatory due diligence that started just after the president got elected and that I would go through I would make a decision, and the circumstances leading up to the H.R. 1 vote just made that moment the right moment for me to tell the president. It was, some people have confused what happened that night, okay? I told, for the first time in the 10 years that I've known the president, he made a comment about me on social media. He'd never done it before, although we disagreed a couple of times. I've never read the entire post, in part because I don't have an account on Truth Social, and in part because I don't read any social media. My staff forced me through screenshots. But it was enough for me to say, look, if we're going to get into this and we've got irreconcilable differences on the health care policy, it's probably a good time for the president to start looking for a replacement. So I told him that through a text. Prior to him, I think there are some people in the MAGA crowd that said, well, the president threatened a primary, so that's why Tillis decided to resign. Or retire. I told the president before he ever put that out on social media it was time to find a replacement.
You used the phrase a moment ago, confirmatory due diligence. Mm-hmm. Will the Republican Senate majority come to regret confirming Pete Hegseth or Robert F. Kennedy Jr.?
I don't think they'll come to regret it. The issue with Hegseth, that's another great subject. Look, the reason why I ultimately voted for Hegseth is the Senate Armed Services Committee confirmed him unanimously. I have to leave it to the Committee of Jurisdiction to judge technical skills. And then
but there's been time to evaluate him since.
Well, that's right. And I think that maybe
you said he doesn't measure up.
Maybe they were a little generous with their assessment of his technical skills. So, but regretting it, look, it's a large, complex organization. No one person runs the daily operations of it.
Enough.
And so you'd have to go back and determine what specific, if you were going to be intellectually honest, what specific decisions did he make and whether they were helpful or harmful. That'll play out over the course of his tenure, or certainly be a subject of a history book or two.
Is it dangerous for the country to have an out-of-depth defense secretary?
I don't think it's ideal, but again, you got to realize that the Department of Defense has some really capable men and women with stars on their shoulders that some people discredit nowadays because they think being a general is a bad thing and being an enlisted's the only thing. I think you need both. But a lot of those people are working every day, and their lives haven't changed substantially. I think about the heads of FORSCOM. I think the JSOC, Special Operations, MARSOC, those operations are moving along. They're not influenced by the day-to-day politics of Washington or SecDef. They're executing just fine, and they're keeping us safe. Are we missing the opportunity to run more lean, to recruit more people, those things? Probably.
How about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.?
Kennedy just better get right on vaccine. I mean, this. I don't know if you recently. I think it was this week. Bill Cassidy put out a great op-ed on. He
made assurances to the committee and to Cassidy personally.
That's right. Well,
and Cassidy has come to the conclusion that those were not truthful promises and assertions.
Cassidy was willing to vote. If Cassidy had voted no on Kennedy, I would have voted no, because that's how much stock I put in Bill Cassidy's technical expertise. He's an extraordinary, brilliant person. But I think he appropriately was going to give Kennedy a chance to say, look, we're going to cut through the rhetoric. We're just going to see.
Haley, thank you so much.
Can I grab anything else?
No, we're great.
I think we're good.
Excellent. Thank you.
I said, as a practical matter, we need to see if he's going to be right on vaccines. And he's drifting a bit. I mean, the whole idea that one of the crowning achievements of President Trump's first term was vaccine.
Operation Warp Speed.
Operation Warp Speed and the mRNA platform. And now it promises to be the platform for so many other things, and now people are trying to discredit it. So we're taking a step back from one of the most extraordinary scientific breakthroughs in warp speed time ever.
How does that make America healthy again? I don't get it.
I don't know it will, but I do think that Cassidy's onto something, and I'll, whatever position Bill takes in this space, I'm going to take a similar position. He's the expert.
What that leaves the country with, though, Senator, is this uncomfortable fact that they're confirmed, and unless they're replaced by the president, they're staying.
Mm-hmm.
And that reinforces the perception that if the president says it, House and Senate Republicans do it.
Well, I think
even if they have misgivings,
no,
privately or publicly.
No, I don't buy that, because I don't think anything is forever. I think things change over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you systematically look at things, you will have members that's sharper if you use the serrated.
Yeah, that's probably
there
true.
You go.
That's probably true.
I had to do that. That was so dang good. He was holding a knife like this. And
every senator loves a cheap shot.
And the chickens, every reporter loves a cheap shot. They just usually happen after the interview. But I'm sorry, I lost my place.
That was your IQ test, Senator, and you passed it.
No, I mean, you got to look at every administration had, peaks and valleys in terms of the nominations. I think what's going to happen with the Senate over time, though, is this vaccine thing. If Kennedy doesn't get it right, he's going to get increasing pushback. No different than some of the pushback you're seeing in some other committees of jurisdiction. Now, that'll build over time. So if they really want to keep, and they should rightfully assume that Republicans are, to a large extent, going to be in lockstep with the administration. That's what Biden did. Think about some of the crazy policies he supported. Think about some of the crazy people he had to confirm, from my perspective. But you reach a point where you're going, I don't know. I don't think this is in your best interest, which has been foundational to my whole discussion with President Trump. It's like, look, why would it make any sense for me to openly oppose a Republican president about a policy? What personal gain could I derive from that? And so maybe you should at least look at the details, and on a purely objective basis, say, Tillis is onto something here, or Tom, you didn't think about it this way. It's like the estimates for the health care impact for Medicaid. Tell me where my math is wrong. Tell me where my assumptions are wrong. If they're right, then why on earth are you doing it?
Are you, in any way, shape, or form, alarmed by anything you have seen from this administration in the immigration space?
Yeah, I think it's another area where I'm starting to track reactions of Hispanics. And I believe if we're not careful, we're going to lose some of that mojo that the president had going into the last election. Not so much for the president, he's termed out, but for members that are running in districts and in states where the Hispanic population could be the margin of error.
What do you think is happening? Do you think they're coming to different conclusions about what was promised and what's actually happening?
Yeah, because, I mean, and if we're not careful, we could be repeating the very sort of perception, it's not reality, but the perception of what led them to legally immigrate to the United States. I'm talking about the legally present population of Hispanics, for example. They left countries that had military presences in all of their towns. They left countries where they didn't feel like that they were fully benefiting from due process. They left those countries. So if we're not careful, even though it's not directly affecting them, if they're legally present, they're going, I don't know, this feels like a country I left, the nation of my birth. I've always said, you have any idea how profound it would be to decide that country you grew up in, the one that you probably said their pledges to and listened to their national anthems, that it was so bad you wanted to turn your back on it and become a citizen of another country? And so it's got to be burned in their mind what those circumstances were. And any time our behavior, it's not literally what they fled from, but any time our behavior mimics that, I don't know. I think that's
runs roughshod over due process.
Right. Or bypassing a shortcut. That's not. Any time you start rationalizing taking shortcuts to due process, to freedom of speech, to freedom of expression, then it gets people who have lived under oppression, I think it gets them nervous, and rightfully so.
How about gimmicky names for detention centers like Alligator Alcatraz and Deport Depot? And
I think it's goofy. I just don't buy. I advise businesses. I never advise them on goofy little slogans and stuff. It may seem cute in the moment, but if all of a sudden you've got somebody in Alligator Alcatraz or whatever the other garbage they're calling these facilities, it starts affecting families, and people kind of like joking it off. I think what they're doing, they may be fine if they're in a confirmed position in the White House, but if you're running in a tough district, you should be looking at that rhetoric and see how it's going to help you get reelected as a Republican.
Speaking of districts, if you talk to a national Democrat who is read in on redistricting, they will point to North Carolina as a place that was changed via redistricting, and a 50-50 state became a heavily Republican state in congressional representation because of a aggressive gerrymander. How do you regard what's going on in Texas, what it has provoked in California, what it may provoke across the country? Should we be going through a mid-census redistricting battle?
I kind of view this from two perspectives. Number one, it's really rich for Democrats to say, how dare you gerrymander? I mean, my gosh, we learned everything we know about gerrymandering from Democrats in North Carolina. We are one of the most litigated states. When I became Speaker, I tried to tell them, guys, I said, number one, I, as the Speaker of the House, don't even want to weigh in to redistricting. You decide what is the best defense. There are political considerations in redistricting. There's no problem with that. I mean, that was always envisioned. I said be prepared for the inevitable lawsuit, because we rank up there in the probably top 2 or 3 for states most litigated over redistricting. And we got our redistricting maps approved when we did it, when we came in, by the Obama Department of Justice. And then we went in to implement it. So I think the states need to be careful, because if you're moving into a cycle where we're likely to have headwinds, and historically you do after a presidential election, and you try to get more seats by spreading out the Republican margins,
there's a danger there.
You could get caught sleeping. Now, look, we won in 2010. Going into the election, it was 68 Democrats, 52 Republicans in the legislature. Coming out of the election and me becoming Speaker, it was 68 Republicans and 52 Democrats. Those were Democrat-drawn districts. And so they may be putting too much stock in that.
But I guess the broader question, Senator, is this. If states take cues from other states and redraw maps just because there is a political imperative to do so, or one is felt. Does that deepen the sense of alienation? Does that deepen the sense that we are different from one another and that political stakes, whatever they are more important than any other consideration?
Yeah, I think it's a fair argument. But there's a more foundational question: what's going on right now? It goes back to what I said earlier. If you're a limited government, decentralized conservative, I don't like the fact that now redistricting initiatives are occurring in large part because the White House told them to. Because that, again, I mean, you can't have it both ways, folks. You're either a limited government conservative where states make decisions in state houses, or you're not. And now all of a sudden you've got the talking heads, like what's his name, Kirk or whatever? I can't remember his name.
Charlie Kirk?
Yeah. So you got this talking head saying that we should occupy every city with the forces like we're doing in Washington. He's got to be out of his freaking mind. What conservative could say that? I guess he's not a conservative. I don't know what he is, but he's not a conservative. Not if he views it that way. He's a populist that's going to get on to anything else. Well, this whole idea with redistricting is the same thing. I mean, you're rationalizing a big government central control solution, which is, like I said, antithetical to any conservative ideology I've ever understood or embraced.
Talk to me about how that filters through your assessment of the changes President Trump wants to make to FEMA. As we speak, there's a beautiful day here in Cornelius, North Carolina, but Aaron is moving toward the mid-Atlantic. It may brush by, it may be a non-event, but there'll be other hurricanes this year. You are still in this state, as is Georgia, particularly dealing with the after effects of Helene. What do you want to happen to FEMA, and what risks is this administration taking, talking about and implementing maneuvers to shrink its role and hand this over to the states?
Well, it's number one, do you realize it was about a year ago that we were floating down a river in western North Carolina?
I do. I remember that well.
But who knew 7 weeks later we'd have 105 people dead, 2 or 3 still missing, over 250 people
right there
in the region, all affected by Helene. Right there.
Right where we were.
And fortunately, that area, fortunately for those folks, that area was relatively unscathed, relatively speaking. But when I think it was Noam or somebody who was saying that we should eliminate FEMA, my immediate reaction was that's clearly coming from somebody who's never managed a major storm crisis. Because if you think about why FEMA was created, it was in the aftermath of a horrible response to a massive storm. And we realized that storms have this nasty habit of not honoring state lines and county lines, and they just go wherever the hell they want to go. And in this case, it went through Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, up into West Virginia, the western part of Virginia. That was the footprint of Helene. 250 people dead, $50 billion of damage in North Carolina alone. Do we really want, when they were originally talking about eliminating FEMA, I asked people, do we really want to play paper, scissors, rock to figure out what state or what county leads a disaster? Okay, storm's coming. It's off the Antilles. Not really sure where it's going to go. Everybody pick the straw. Figure out who's going to manage this response. You have any idea how inefficient that would be?
You pick your model. You pick the European model. You pick the
That's right. Okay, well,
model.
If it goes up that string, you'll be responsible. It makes no sense. Now, if you want to make FEMA leaner, if you want to push the staff out of D.C. into regional response areas, if you want to actually act on some of the reforms that we've proposed over the past couple of years, great idea. But eliminating FEMA as the main convener of other resources, the other thing about FEMA is it's fairly light in terms of the people that ultimately are on the ground. This is managing state disaster response, local disaster response, the Baptist on Mission, all of the American Red Cross, all the people that come around, they're pre-positioned most of the time.
Yeah, moving water.
Yeah. Can you imagine if every time we have a new game plan, right now we know a storm's about to come. There are already assets that were being pre-positioned for the first named storm. Just get ready, guys. May not come, may come. They're ready. They're on the ready. They have that playbook. Can it be more efficient? Of course. Can you cut through red tape and go right down to local government funding of matters? Absolutely. But to eliminate it, that's just naive. It's a lack of experience.
And based on your experience in state government, no state government operating as most do on balanced budget requirements, can't have a rainy day fund or any kind of disaster fund sufficient.
That's exactly right. You got to be able to rely on the backstop of the federal government. Doesn't mean that some of that money shouldn't ultimately be paid by the state. But you got to eliminate, and look, when you've had like a storm impact the size of the state of Massachusetts, that's what it was in the state of North Carolina, Helene. When you have that kind of a storm impact, you got to flood the zone with resources. You got to clear creeks. You got to remove debris. You've got to get the basic infrastructure in place so that you can start rescuing living survivors and recovering dead ones. That has to happen quickly, and the last thing you should be talking about is admin, what accounts it's going to come from, et cetera. You got to execute.
Did the Biden administration screw that up?
Biden was not particularly good. I mean, I had a dust up with Governor Cooper over deployment of resources. I wanted people out of Fort Bragg sooner. To President Trump's credit, he was running at the time. He agreed with that, but they took a week longer than they should have. And so, Biden, maybe played a role in that, but I really think at that point when you're making the call on who to deploy, who to get out there, that really rests down in the states. It's more the resources and some of the front-end planning that I expect the federal government and FEMA to do.
Today, in America, what's the best part of the political arena and what's the worst part?
I think the best part of it is that if you make the investment in relationships, you can have extraordinary investments with members you would never think would be friends or have a great relationship with, that actually even work together. So I think it's the behind the scenes, under the radar sort of stuff that goes on in the Senate is the best part of the job.
So who are you good unexpected friends?
I'm good. I got a lot of them. In fact, it's a lot shorter discussion to talk about the ones that I don't have a relationship with on either side of the aisle. Probably fewer than a dozen. But it's, some of it's not even just legislative stuff. I mean, I wish people could see some of the humor that goes on, some of the discussion about how family members are, those sorts of things that still go on.
So that's the best part. What's the worst part?
Political opportunism and fundraising models that have more to do with the individual's personal objectives than actually making the country stronger, safer, or better. That's the worst part. There's a lot of people who have this formula. It's like, I'm fighting for you. I'm never going to get this done. But I'm fighting for you, and if you send me $50, I can keep on promising this till the towels come home. Although it's never going to get done, you send me $50, I'll keep fighting. It's ridiculous. That happens every day. And it's a bipartisan sort of a illness. It's like, guys, my God, why did you run for the Senate? Why don't you just go be a talking head and sell people hair cream or whatever that other stuff they're trying to sell on the internet now? It just doesn't make sense to me.
When you had to be at full throttle, how much time did you have to spend fundraising?
Oh, I mean, my gosh.
In a given week?
In a given week, it was not uncommon up until, I announced that I was retiring. It wasn't uncommon for me to have a minimum of 4 fundraisers a week. A minimum of 4.
That's in-person things.
Yeah, and that's
in
before
addition
I get into
to
cycle.
the dialing for dollars.
That's right. That's before I get into cycle. I hate raising money for myself. I don't mind raising money for other members or for worthy nonprofits. I hate raising money for myself. I hate asking people for money for me. But it's a natural part of the job. I did it. Probably didn't do it as well as some, but probably better than most.
It's often regarded as a marker of success in your world, how much money you raise. Is that the best or even near best metric?
Well, I have a political consultant that told me years and years ago, there is no problem that can't be solved with money. And it's largely true, unless you're a fundamentally flawed candidate and a horrible human being. And then there's not enough money to fix your problem. But for the most part, money, people say, why is there so much money in politics? Because there's not enough people to offset it. If I had more people naturally coming up and volunteering and advertising and planting signs and doing it the old-fashioned way, there'd be less money. But we're in a digital world now and in a world of expediency where, money is the coin of the realm in political campaigns. Having said that, And neither of the two Senate races were we anywhere near. It was like a 40-60 split. So you don't have to raise more money to win. You just have to be smart in the way that you raise the money that you spend.
And then spend it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned Trump's legacy and wanting to assist it in whatever way you can for your remaining time in the Senate. If you were to formulate a description of the Trump legacy thus far, what would it be?
I think the president has...
I don't just mean the second term. I mean everything.
Yeah, that's why I was going to go back. I think that the president did a good job of expressing frustration of the American people with the way government was running. I think that he rightfully points out that I believe that many liberals think that it's unseemly to call us an exceptional nation. I don't. I believe he believes in American exceptionalism. I do too. Doesn't mean to be arrogant. I mean, we are an exceptional nation. Pick anyone in history that's come close. Pick any governing institution that bears any resemblance to what we do on Capitol Hill, particularly the Senate chamber. We are an exceptional nation. We produce exceptional results. And we've helped a number of countries be lifted out of totalitarianism into democracy. So the president's right to reinvigorate that concept of us being an exceptional nation. Where I think the president should rethink some of his strategy is that there's a consequence to being that exceptional nation. The consequence is you are relied on by the rest of the free world to expand democracy. You're relied on to fill voids that, but for you, may not be filled, and then they'll be filled by a terrorist organization or a totalitarian regime. So Trump won, or we'll say 45, did a great job, I think, of pushing the fact we're an exceptional nation and people should follow our lead because we rightfully deserve that recognition, I think, worldwide. I don't think it's arrogant. I think it's objectively true. And we've saved the world, at least on 2 occasions, in world wars, that without our exceptional involvement, this conversation would not be happening today, I firmly believe. But where I think the president's legacy is going to run a risk is this notion that maybe we should retreat and not do the hard work of being that exceptional nation. Maybe we should rethink some of the investments we're making in Africa, for example, or in South America, and everything being on equal footing. How on earth can we conceive of a world where 20 or 30 countries that many people don't even know the names of all of a sudden are on equal footing with the most exceptional nation that's ever existed? In other words, we got to cut them some slack. They're struggling. Their people are starving. They have health challenges. So we're gonna invest in them and give them a glimpse of what it's like to be helped by Western exceptional democracy and hopefully inspire their future leaders to go in that direction. On the one hand, it's altruistic. It's a good thing to do. It's also strategically very important. The more people who have embraced democracy, the fewer people are would-be adversaries. And so it's a long-term investment that you can't. A lot of people say we got to run government like a business. You can do that to a point. But if you're running a business analysis of those 30 countries, you say exit. They're on their own. They provide no short-term measurable benefit to the United States. But then those 30 countries become a confederation of the Russian Republic or, hypothetical. Mm-hmm. Then they become a very, very expensive threat to Western democracy. So the president needs people around him to explain to him the long-term consequences of I think the president's trending away from it, but the biggest concern that I have with the 47 legacy is that it may somehow be characterized as an isolationist administration that left damage in its wake in Europe in particular. This failure to
this brings us back to Ukraine.
Gets us back to the beginning. We fell in Ukraine. We withdraw from Africa. Those voids are going to be filled by people who you would not want to bring home to a family dinner. These collard greens are good.
What do you think? That's a
gotta eat, people.
That's a policy assessment. What do you think the political legacy of Trump is? How did he change American politics, not only in relationship to the Republican Party, but how we think about it, how we talk about it, how we converse about it, etc.?
I think it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to say. I think at the end of the day, the president still has plenty of time to have an extraordinary legacy. But it's going to require some cooperation. It's going to require some humility, which is, not running rampant in Washington, D.C., and by anybody. But I think that presidents are at their best when they are leading and not necessarily leaning on people to lead, but inspiring them by finding things that may fall short of his own personal priority, but then inspire a greater base of the American people and the elected representatives. So he just needs to focus on that to leave a legacy, I think, intact. I also think that the president needs to fire a few people that he's advising, that are advising him on a daily basis because they couldn't negotiate their way or they couldn't execute their way out of a wet paper bag. I mean, they're successful people who have never governed. They've never really been in a business position where they've executed, and they're making what I consider to be amateurish mistakes that are, in some cases, making the president look bad. And no, I'm not I'm not going to get into specifics.
Right, because you're waiting. That'll be in your book, right?
Well, I don't know.
The names will be in your book.
If I am successful, it will never be known, except to the people who lose their jobs, and it will be quietly done. I've told the last communication that I had with the president was paraphrasing. I've still got the text, but it's something along the lines of, if I accomplish, this is after I told the president that he needed to find my replacement. If I accomplish nothing else over the next 18 months, I hope I convince you that you have a number of people working for you who couldn't give a damn about your legacy, and I do. And I'll stand by that. A part of what I have to do, it's not retribution. It's just these people they wouldn't make it in my professional job. I just want them replaced with competent people who actually care about the president's legacy versus their position for the next thing. The president's got people working for him that know, and they're in their 30s. This dude's just a stepping stone to them. Do you honestly think they're going to fall on their sword for even President Trump? No. They're positioning themselves for the next wave. And that's why the president really needs to look at people, boring, technical execution people like me, that are saying, "Dude, don't repeat that Geico commercial." This is how I feel like some of these advisors that I hope get moved aside are fired, and they're not cabinet level. Most of these are people that are walking around Capitol Hill or walking around White House pretending like they're the president when the president's not in the room. The Geico commercial when the kids are running away from the Chainsaw Massacre guy. And the guy says, "What are we going to do?" The girl says, "Why don't we get into the running car?" And the guy says, "Are you crazy? Let's go in the shed where all the chainsaws are." He's got to get rid of those guys that are recommending going in the shed. And I'm going to do everything I can to help him because I want him to have a solid legacy because it benefits him, it benefits the American people, and it benefits the Republican Party.
Is there an heir apparent, a natural heir apparent to Trump?
No, I think it's a jump ball in 28. Absolutely jump ball. I think we're going to probably see one of the most diverse fields for the Republican primary that we've seen in modern times.
Really?
Yeah. I don't see any heir apparent.
Even more than the 16 who ran in 2016?
Yeah.
I chased them all around the country.
No, I think it will be, well, the reality is there. If you look at the 16, there were only about 4 or 5 that were viable.
Granted, but there was still a lot.
The other was there for the podium opportunity. It'd be like me running. I think it's going to be a diverse field of legitimate contenders, and I'll be looking.
So the vice president is not the natural heir apparent.
The vice president was senator for 2 years, and he's been VP for 7 months, so he's got limited political exposure, political history. I mean, he's a good guy, JD. I like. I'm just like, people hate how abrupt I am, but I'm an analytics guy. I'm looking at him the way I looked at the 20 people I recruited to get a majority in North Carolina in 2010. He is one of several people that have to prove that they've got the chops. And, he's smart, he's capable, he's articulate, he's a good dad, and I think a good man. But he's got 2.5 years experience. And the extent to which he's going to build on that experience over the next 2 years before the race starts means that he may come in with a resume that's a little bit lighter than some of the other people considered running. That's just objectively true.
Lighter than, for example, Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Could be, if Marco decides to run, or governors who may run, maybe other senators who want to run.
Mm-hmm. Is there a single Democrat you can think of that scares you in terms of harnessing the party and possibly becoming a serious presidential contender in 2028?
Yeah, actually, there's several. I'm not going to mention their name, though. That'd be crazy. I mean,
go ahead.
Your mind.
Go ahead.
But yeah, actually, I ran into one. He gave a public speech. It was at a private setting, but I happened to be in there with him. I said, "Dude, you scare the hell out of me."
Uh-huh.
What do you mean? I said, "Because you made total sense, and you are the exact opposite of the narrative of the Democratic Party. So I hope your message doesn't get legs." So they're out there, and that's what I mean. It's like, guys, don't go into the shed with the chainsaws. If you get people who have a vision and can get enough people to get the nomination that can really demonstrate a left of center alternative in an environment with extreme choices, I think that they are a huge threat. They're a huge threat for congressional races. They're a huge threat for senatorial races next year, and they will be an enormous threat for the presidential election in 2028. Enormous.
If we'd had this conversation 3 months ago, we would have been talking nonstop about tariffs.
Oh, taxes? Yeah.
We aren't, not because they're not an issue. They are an issue. They are still filtering through the economy, but they seem less topical than they were 3 months ago. Your assessment of where we are and where we're heading.
Well, number one, I mean, again, it just goes down to conservative. There's two issues that I have with tariffs in their current form. Number one, last time I checked, founding fathers really thought Congress should weigh in on trade.
Very clear on that.
I mean, even for a non-attorney guy that went to 5 different schools before I got my degree at 37, I can understand that. But let's assume that that's not enough for you. When have tariffs not been a tax? See, I think a lot of the American people think we imposed a 10% tariff on the UK. Well, like the UK government's writing a check to us. Our UK businesses are. The businesses that are buying those products in the United States are writing a 10% higher check. Now, some of them go, well, at 10%, maybe there's a local supplier, but in most cases there are not, just based on the way global supply chains work today. So they're paying businesses. So on the one hand, we re-implement historic tax cuts in H.R. 1. But then we discount the impact on businesses by taxing a lot of their inputs by 10% or 50%. Mm-hmm. So tariffs, I got a real problem with. There are some, if you use them surgically, but now we've used them as a blunt force object, that makes no sense to me.
There was more surgical use in the first Trump administration.
Yeah. Also, the emergency declaration. I'm going, okay, guys, let's sort through this thought experiment.
He's up to 22 by now.
Brazil.
22 emergencies.
I know, but Brazil. And
10 in the second term.
Quite honestly, the issue, the real worry here is that there hasn't been any legal challenge to it because it's kind of hard to find standing, and things are moving very quickly. So conservatives who are rationalizing this emergency sort of expansion of power of the Article 2 branch better be ready when the next Democrat comes in, because there's going to be an emergency.
Lots of them.
And they're going to say, look at all this stuff that was never challenged in the courts as a reason for doing it. We are empowering the Article 2 branch like we never have before, at least in modern history. So
back to Brazil. You're going to make a point
But then
about
back
Brazil.
to Brazil. Okay, look at this. Now let's say, by God, it is time to impose tariffs on all these countries that we've got a trade deficit with, right? 100%. Now, we find out that there's a judicial process in a sovereign country about a transition of power, and that becomes a basis for imposing a 50% tariff on a country that we have a trade surplus in Brazil. How does that make sense? And the reason I worry about that, even if you could argue that maybe in that particular case, number one, you put Brazil in an untenable position, right? If you reverse the courts, you've sent to the world that you don't have a rule of law, which makes you an unhospitable place for businesses to grow. And if you don't do it, then you got to deal with the impact of a 50% tariff, which I believe that they're going to do because Brazil. I met with about 5 or 6 senators from Brazil the week before I left D.C. I met one who's a part of the opposition party, who is a friend of the president in question, the former president,
Bolsonaro,
and he said, we've got to let the legal process work, but this is devastating to our relationship. It will be devastating to our economy.
Sends a signal all throughout South America and Central America.
Well, I could worry about that, but here's what I really worry about as a former advisor to Fortune 500 companies. We're about to make a big capital expenditure decision, Tom. What do you think about us moving forward? I said, no damn way. I don't have any earthly idea. If we're talking about something that has supply chains, global supply chains, I have no earthly idea what trade's going to look like. Because just when we think things are settled down or we've got a formula going after nations that have a trade deficit, now we're imposing 50% tariffs on a nation that we've had a relationship with for 200 years that has a trade surplus. So as a business advisor, I go, there's no certainty here. And in the face of uncertainty, you don't make business bets. So back to the point, people say, you're crazy. It's not affecting prices. Well, now we're starting to see evidence that wholesale prices are on the rise. We're clearly seeing evidence where businesses' earnings are going to be down because they're absorbing as much of the tariffs as possible to not raise prices. It's a business decision they have to make, maybe a political decision too, not wanting to get the ire of this administration. But at the end of the day, that's all got to, unless the growth is so significant to mask the underlying cost drivers, at some point I think we'll start seeing an uptick, and my guess is it'll be after the first part of the year.
Before I let you go,
if we don't settle things down,
right.
It's avoidable.
Before I let you go, the administration is talking about taking a 10% stake of Intel. It has negotiated a U.S. Steel merger, and the president retains what he calls a golden share to make decisions about that. There have been relationships forged with Apple and other companies that come to the White House, do certain specific things for the president, and in exchange, the president extracts something that the federal government gets, putting the federal government in lots of boardrooms it hasn't been in before.
Yeah.
Now, Biden did that, too, with the Inflation Reduction Act and some other things. I'm not suggesting he didn't. How comfortable or uncomfortable are you with this?
The fact that Biden did it, too, should be your first indication that I would be uncomfortable with it. My gosh, I remember when the U.S. Steel acquisition was going through and we heard about the golden share. It reminded me of a chapter from Atlas Shrugged about Reardon Steel and the U.S. government getting involved in the management of that steel. Look, I don't care if it's $1 or $1 billion stake in an American country. That starts feeling like a semi-state-owned enterprise a la CCCP. I don't believe that the U.S. government should be picking winners and losers, because you won't always be right.
Export licenses?
With U.S. taxpayer dollars. Let
NVIDIA,
the American
AMD.
businesses, let retirees and other people decide how much of their portfolio should be in tech stocks, for example. But look, that's where you can't run the government like a business. Does anybody in their right mind think that if you have, I don't know what the stake is going to be in Intel, but does anybody really believe that any opinion except the opinion of the administration is really going to matter in boardroom discussions going forward? How much objectivity can they have when the richest, most resource entity on the face of the planet and in the history of the world has a stake in your future? You can't be a free market. This is why, if there's anything I do like saying, I told you so. And for so many of my self-described true conservatives, you're going to have to explain to me how this reconciles with true conservatism and true free market capitalism. I don't see it. I see it like Reardon Steel or pick a state-owned enterprise in China.
Look it up, kids. Atlas Shrugged. It's an important book. Thom Tillis.
And do Reardon Steel, and you'll get right to the chapter that I'm talking about. That feels like we read another one.
Our thanks to Hello Sailor. Our thanks to the good people here in Cornelius,
Great
North Carolina.
Food. Love the collard greens. Taught you how to use a knife.
You taught me how to use a knife. Again with the cheap shot. Senator Tillis, it's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, you too.